Again, in case you forgot or just catching up, just seeing us, we're Performance Infill. We're the growth of a couple of different companies, just hoping to build homes for people using the equity and finances that they already have. In our last video, we kind of discussed a little bit about where you can get that equity and what your home does for you. But we stumbled upon a bunch of words, and we also used a lot of terms that apparently aren't used with mortgage brokers. And that is why we brought in Lenny. So this is Lenny Ramponi with Ramponi Marsh, and he's going to explain to us how they use what we've already saved in our home to build more homes.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is going to be great.
Good, jump in. So in our last video, we kind of explained how if you're a homeowner and you've been living there for 10, 15, 20 years, you have clearly made some value in your home, and how now you want to use that value and that equity to either tear down your home and build more homes in infill, or keep your existing home, maybe do some renovations and build infill on your property to either sell, rent, or have other family living there.
Maybe you add a carriage house to rent out or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, if someone has been in the market for quite some time, like you said, and let's say their place today is worth $1 million, legally you can go up to 80% of the appraised value of the property. And that is set out by the government of Canada. Those are the laws. So subject to qualifying, you can go up to 80% of the property. If you don't traditionally qualify like the major banks or with the major banks and lenders, there are companies that will lend you the money based on the asset, liability, and the overall project on what's going to happen. So let's take a carriage house, for example. If someone has the $1 million property currently and they want to build a carriage house and it's going to cost them $500,000, saying that for easy math, obviously, they can take the monies up front and then they can do what they want with all the monies, and they can pay a payment on the onset, day one. Or they can take it in chunks depending on how the project goes and how they want. So they're only paying interest at certain portions throughout the project. So there's a few different ways to do that.
Now, does that also depend on their builder and how their builder's invoicing them?
Correct, it can. Yeah, the relationship with the builder is important in terms of the draw schedule. Typically, we will still set it up to where the client would have enough funds to continue to pay the builder invoices every 30 days. But, depending on any upgrades and stuff, it doesn't always happen in a perfect world.
Right.
But that is possible.
Okay. So before we got on video, we kind of had an idea as a couple of different conversations of couple buyer X and buyer Y. So Jamila and Andre had kind of given us some ideas. So maybe we go back to what Jamila and you were talking about.
Yeah, so we can elaborate on this carriage home concept. So if the property's worth $1 million, I can open up 80% of that, which is $800,000. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. And this is the math guys over here.
800,000 if you don't have any other liabilities attached to it.
This is true.
Important to
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
So,
800,000 less your current liabilities.
Correct.
Would be what you can get out.
if I still have a $200,000 mortgage on the house,
Yep.
I have access to $600,000.
That's right.
That's right.
Can we write these down?
Just about to read that. Yeah.
It's $1 million value.
1,800,000, which equals 80%. And then if you had a $200,000 mortgage, we would take that off. So your total in your pocket would be approximately 600,000.
So say the carriage home costs you $500,000 to build, you're pretty much green light to go, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so we would, in this scenario, we would look to borrow the 500,000 plus what the payments are going to be throughout the time. So if you are, fixed income, you don't have to worry about cash flow. You still live your life as is. So we take into consideration all that. So then the day you would have, $100,000 surplus in this to sort of deal with any cost overruns or any upgrades maybe you want to do with the builder, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
We often call that like an interest reserve.
Yes.
Or a contingency reserve.
That's exactly it. And some lenders they'll accumulate or estimate 15% in terms of that.
Okay.
That'll be part of it. They'll want to see that the client has 15% cost overruns.
Yeah.
So in this case here, you'd have $100,000 in cost overruns. That's more than 15%.
Yeah. So 100 on 500,000 would be 20%.
Correct.
And is that about the percentage that a lender would be looking for?
This scenario here would be a percentage of exactly what a lender would be looking for.
So will they also income test it afterwards? And what I mean is when if you're going to go and borrow $600,000 and then your new mortgage at the end of the day with your new carriage house goes back up to $800,000, will they be looking at, okay, there's rental income from the carriage house plus your fixed income as in this example? Will the lender also be looking at that?
Yes, absolutely. So you're increasing your debt load to add revenue on your property. Lenders will always take that into consideration.
Sure.
Even if it's conforming or non-conforming.
Yeah.
So if you end up putting a suite in your place and it's non-conforming, that can still be taken into consideration. People like using the words legal and illegal. Those are not great words when you're talking with money. It's conforming and non-conforming. So yeah, and every lender is different. So
Sure.
if you're talking to one lender, they're not able to like talk to this and talk to this. So it's really important to deal with a mortgage broker who has a variety of options for you.
So this might be a little complicated, but in commercial lending, you often look at coverage ratios. So the lender will want to see 120% coverage ratio on the cost. So for really easy math, say you have $1,000 of debt payment per month, the lender will want to see at least, say, $1,200 of income coming in to cover it. Is that pretty standard here too? Will they look at a higher cover ratio, or are they just looking for 1-to-1 or 100%?
So depending on the client, like the income of the client is important for obvious payback, the ability to pay it back. The project is important. Not every lender has an appetite for certain projects, whether it be doing a fourplex or adding a carriage house. Those are different appetites for different lenders.
Okay.
And so to go back to your question, it becomes about the overall project. And so that's a tough one to answer because rental income is taken into consideration different for every file with every lender.
Okay.
So the rule of thumb would be you can borrow up to 44% of your gross monthly income, family income, not including what any rents would be, because everything's different. So it's got a little bit like the ratio game, but the overall project comes down to your appetite for the lender. And sometimes lenders they have too many of those on the books, and they're just going to turn you down. They're going to find I don't know what's the word, flaky reason to turn you down, but it's in the reality. They just have too many of those in the books.
Right.
Yeah. So
So how much does the situation change if it's no longer something that if we're not using it as a rental property now? Now we're going to subdivide and turn these into 4 separate titles
And sell them?
and sell them.
Well, before we go there, I just want to slow this down just a little bit for the listener and kind of wrap this up in a nice bow, which is you've got $800,000, you've got an existing $200,000 mortgage, you got a $500,000 project to build with $600,000 available. So some of the key points that happened in that conversation was this is pretty easy to get the money for that project because that is also increasing the value of your land and providing a rental income that supports your current income to pay this off. Of course, every scenario is unique, which is why you need to talk to a guy like Lenny and run all your numbers. But generally, that's what we were talking about there. The other important point I don't want to glaze over is that there's a way to roll your payments through construction into this mortgage. So yes, you can get access to this money. They will create an amount set aside to make those monthly payments as you go through construction. And once the project is complete and rolled into whatever new loan exists at the end, then your payments would start happening along with the rental income coming in to support it.
That's right. And sometimes, just to extend that, it becomes a 2-step process in the sense of you need lender A to get the project built and lender B to come in once the project is done. Reason being, not every lender does build mortgages. And so depending on your file and the situation, sometimes it becomes a 2-step process. But the payments are always built in. Then the day you pay off what you need to or what you want to. In this scenario here, let's say it was a 2-step project process. You borrowed 500, you were able to take out 600, and let's say you had some savings along the way in terms of the the framer wasn't as expensive or whatever, there's some savings, you're able to, on step 2, pay out what you need and bring that mortgage down if necessary.
So in that example, you have a construction lender for the build mortgage.
Yes.
And then you have a term lender for the term loan.
That's right.
And sometimes it's also advantageous to change it because different lenders offer different ratios and different interest rates. So sometimes your construction lender, sometimes some term lenders don't do construction mortgages.
Correct.
And sometimes, or many times, in fact, a lot of times the lender that does the construction isn't as competitive in terms of the interest rate for a term loan.
Correct. And and those lenders for construction are just there to help you get it built.
Yeah.
So you can go to a term lender after.
Yeah.
So, but in those situations, you sort all of that out ahead of time so that at the end of the build process, the homeowner isn't going to find a new lender.
That's exactly it. So we get the numbers on the onset. Yes, you can do this, but plan B is step 2, is just as important, because if you don't know what step 2 is, step 1, you did it for nothing.
Right.
Yes.
So as important it is to have all of the pre-work done to know where your sewer and your power and all of that stuff is coming and your plans on what you're doing and the approvals of the city, there is equally as much as a financial plan set in place at the beginning that runs alongside of the project. And it's important to be working with lenders and brokers that have that experience and or just really like doing construction loans, because they're creative, and obviously just running a mortgage on existing house is easy, right?
It is different. No, it's not easy. Mortgages used to be easy, but now with the cost of everything, it's tightened up and it's insane. Just like flying, years and years ago, you didn't have to take off your sandals and your belt and then still get an X-ray to go through, right? You just went through a metal detector and hopped on. So the bad have ruined it for the good. So it's very key to have experience. Much like your guys' industry, there's more to it. And so it can unravel like an onion pretty quick. And we've cleaned up far too many messes for people that dealt with inexperienced lenders or mortgage brokers, to where they were short on funds and it wasn't a great situation to get the project completed, and that could have been eliminated on the onset. So
this is something earlier we talked about. There's like a development phase of maybe the first 20 or 30% of these kinds of infill projects, and then there's the construction phase, which is the latter 70 or 80%. This is something, these kinds of numbers, at least on the basic ratios we've talked about today, you're going to want to do in that upfront due diligence period before you get any shovels in the ground, or frankly, before you even go and design the whole project. You're going to want to run your financial scenarios both for your construction and your term or your final loan during your due diligence. So during that first 30 or 60 days of your project.
Well, we'll run the numbers. That's like you were saying, the client, as a client, you don't have to worry about how am I going to do this. We'll do the shopping for you, and we'll come back and say, okay, here's your options. A, B, C, D, E, F, so on and so forth.
And I think it's really important to mention, and we're going to go way more in depth in another couple of videos on the process and all the steps. But there's you initially get comfortable with your finances on a concept like we're talking about today, which would give you the confidence to invest money to create your plans and figure out what exactly you're doing there. And then you take that back to the lender where you have a more concrete idea of what you're doing, what that might cost, and they run that again to make sure that is feasible before you move forward. So there's all different stages in this process that give you more confidence about moving to the next stage, right?
So I think it's important then that you take back, and now let's assume that we're going to subdivide and sell and or rent properties, because then market evaluation becomes important, but then also how you're borrowing and how you're implementing that changes as well.
Absolutely, because if you are selling them, you want to make sure that you come unscathed in terms of a penalty as best as possible, knowing that you're going to sell them in due time. So,
probably involve an appraisal. So in that instance, you're going to almost certainly have an appraisal to say, what is the future value of those, say, 4 homes we're creating? And then you're going to, simplistically speaking, compare that future value against what are all of the costs that are going to go into this project. And of course, the future value needs to be greater than the project costs.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. The appraiser on the onset will do as is. So they'll actually take a picture of the dirt, if it's just dirt, and they'll say, as of today, this is worth X. But as of tomorrow, if those units are built, like you told me, and the pictures and the plans and the whatever you had given, then it's going to be worth Y. And then that's kind of the dollar value we get to go off of.
So to simplify it from an initial lending perspective, we can use the same scenario. Your property's worth $1 million. You've got $800,000 worth of equity, but your project you're building now is, $1.2 million. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now you need to get more money than you have equity, and this is where you're loaning against the future value of what you're building.
That's right.
And the revenue of what you're building is coming in, whether it's because you're selling it or you're renting it out.
And those are 2 very different options, because if you're selling it, you're kind of only doing step 1 of what Lenny said. You're using that construction financing or whatever sort of financing that you have to get it built, get it done, and then you're obviously disposing of those assets. Whereas if you're going to be renting them out for the long term after that, you'll need part 2, which is some sort of takeout facility that would then cover all of the loans that you have accrued to build the project in the first place.
And if you're a sophisticated borrower, that could come in, maybe you were talking about opening up holding companies and having lenders that, tax strategies, and you can get pretty deep into that if you're a sophisticated person looking to do that. For this conversation, I don't know if we need to dive that deep, but there's so many options, and that's why circling back to experience, you guys have seen it in your industry, I've seen it in mine. I think we can all say we wouldn't want to use a dentist with less than 6 months experience. So you go where there's experience and there's a track record. So, everything is different. Every file is different. Every scenario is different on what the project's going to be, how much it's going to cost. With someone might want to spend more money and have it super efficient, and that's going to cost more on the project.
Yeah.
And so there's so many different things. It's to have experience is very crucial.
So let's just assume that you don't have experience and this is your first time you're doing it.
Yeah.
Are you able to walk someone who's looking to start that investment portfolio for themselves as far as building and that type of thing? Are you able to take your expertise and help them down that line?
Absolutely. I love helping people build wealth through real estate because
Love that term.
I understand the game, if you will. And what I mean by that is the borrowing money game has done this over the past 20 years. And if you haven't done that, the game has passed you by. And there's been so many changes and so many things that people don't know what they can and can't do, which is crazy. But when you think of it, it's not I'm not great at a car engine. I'm not a mechanic.
Yeah, I would get you to be my dentist.
Exactly. There you go. That's exactly it. So yeah.
And I think a lot of the stuff we talked about today in this video, as well as the other videos, is I hear a lot of people when they go out to buy their first home, or they're selling and buying their second home, or they're watching friends buy investment properties and they're wondering how are they doing that, And they say I wish I was taught this in school. That class, I hear that all the time. Why wasn't I taught this in school? I wish I was taught this in school. And I think this video series, we're touching on a lot of that stuff that people wish they would have learned in school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to run us through an example of a full teardown and building out a fourplex, for example?
Yeah. So, if you will stick your current value of your property is $1 million.
Yeah.
Right?
Same property, yeah.
Okay. You're borrowing $800,000 less the $200,000 you already owe.
Sure.
We're still sticking with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. So that's $600,000. We took off the $100,000 for cost overrun, right? And this person is left with $500,000 to proceed on the project. Or is that where we're still using that?
Yep.
Did we do that? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I really did doctor sometimes. Okay, and then they want to build a fourplex.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so fourplex would cost.
Well, in this example, let's use $2 million.
Yeah.
The total project cost.
Yep.
So if it's $2 million total project costs, you've got your 500 grand equity to contribute towards that, which roughly lines up with your 75% loan to cost.
That's right.
Loan to value ratio, rather.
That's right. So 2 million minus 500, you would need to borrow 1.5 still.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yep.
So it comes down to A, the client being able to afford that. B, the appetite for the lender. And if those don't work, then there are different lenders that will do it based on the project and what the exit strategy is.
Sure.
So they will help you come and get it built.
Yep.
And so if the plan in this was to fourplex,
Let's say we're selling it. We'll
sell it,
selling
owner
all
occupied,
units.
all the units.
All units we're selling on the back end of the finished construction.
Using these numbers, let's say we're selling them each for 750 grand. So again, now let's round numbers. 750,000 times 4
So that's 3 million.
takes us 3 million.
3
And our
million.
total project cost here is 2.
That's right. 2. We borrowed this on the onset, this to complete the project.
Yeah.
And that's the spread.
Correct.
Yeah.
So when you're going to a lender and you're looking at the project itself, they're taking into consideration this $3 billion sell.
Correct.
And-
Because the appraiser will have done the as if complete value on the project. So it gives a lender an idea of what's going to happen at the end.
Yeah.
Now, that's why they only go to 75%, some cases 80% of the project, because things would have to decrease by 20 or 25% before they were even Steven on their money.
Before there's any risk to the lender.
There you go.
So in this instance, there's 2 appraisals. The first appraisal needs to show, okay, the land is worth $1 million.
Correct.
And then the second appraisal needs to show, once you've completed this fourplex, these 4 infill homes, those 4 infill homes in aggregate are worth $3 million.
Correct.
So now for the homeowner, what does it look like monthly for them?
Well, we would have built that in the project. So, yeah. So if you are inexperienced, you're going to definitely want an experienced builder to do the project. And if you're experienced in doing the project, then you would know that we're going to build in payments, because no one wants to have a payment of this going forward. They have to live their own lives.
That's usually known as an interest reserve, or are there other terms for that?
Yeah, that's part of it for sure.
And that would be-
interest reserve. They do take into consideration that for sure. And that what that means is they hold the payments back, interest costs back on the onset, so you don't have any payments.
Yeah.
Sometimes if we have to borrow 1.5 and let's say the payments over the course of time were $100,000, we would round up to 1.6.
Yeah.
So then the client would have no problem making the payments and not have to worry about their daily life.
And that 100,000 that you've rounded up would stay essentially at the bank, and they would just continuously draw on that every month.
They would get the funds as they need to.
Yeah.
So it would already be part of the process and it would come into consideration throughout the process.
But that's actually an interesting point that you touched on, and it is a little sophisticated. But if you can negotiate with your lender that they only finance it month to month, as opposed to financing 100% of the draw proceeds up front. A lot of lenders love to take the draw proceeds, draw them down initially on your first mortgage loan,
Yep.
and put them into a separate account. But now you're going to be paying interest on the interest.
Yes.
That's right.
As opposed to asking them, no, you're controlling the funds, so you should forward that each month. So it'll save you on $100,000. It might save you $5,000 or $10,000.
That's right. And albeit the interest is important, it comes down to the overall project.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if the interest rate isn't as attractive as you thought it would be, but you have a $1.5 million spread, you're in great shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a great project, by the way.
Yeah. Touching really briefly on margins, like when you do back of napkin underwriting like this, you want to try and see and have confidence in a 15 to 20% margin. It oftentimes, if you start at 15, start at 20, you might end up at 15 or 12. If you start at 15, you might end up at 10. So you definitely need to have some margin there to play with.
And the lenders, I mean, the government makes the rules for borrowing money, and the lenders do a great job of making sure people aren't house poor. You have the stress test, you're qualifying 2% over, and that's what's their overall need. So here, as you see the spread, this is an easy project all day long. If I had this, I'd be calling you guys to do this.
Right?
Totally.
And I mean, you touched on margins. One more thing that I think, I guess, can touch on what to build, but also what to do with your properties when it's built. When you do have margins, even at the 25% range, what that can create, if you sell 3 of your units, that 4th unit that you've built is brand new, that can almost be kind of free in a sense if you choose to occupy that space and take over that space, because that is essentially the profit that you would have made on this deal. So there's options there for homeowners that want to do the development and want to retain one of the units and sell the other 3. You've essentially created a free house for yourself.
You're in that mortgage free.
With no mortgage.
With no mortgage,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
With no mortgage.
Which we do not talk about in the office. Mortgages are good. No, but that would be an awesome plan for someone. Absolutely. To do exactly this. Sell 3, keep 1 for a rental. Or maybe sell 2 and keep 2. You got 2 kids.
Exactly.
And then you can eventually hand the units off to the kids or whatever.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So you touched a little bit upon different ratios and how different lenders will look at things differently. Maybe we can segue and talk a little bit about A, B, C lenders.
Yeah, so it's based on rate and appetite for a project. A lenders for all your major banks, credit unions, mortgage companies, we call them monolines. That's all they do. They don't take monies on deposits. They just lend mortgages. And then you have your B lenders. Your B lenders, they're slightly higher in rates, but they help fill the void. They've been around forever, and we're using them more and more now because of the stress test, because people may have bruised credit from extending themselves or what have you, or you're self-employed.
Yes.
And
That's a
you
big
write,
one.
that's the biggest one. You're self-employed and you write your income down. Now you don't traditionally qualify, even though you're saving taxes and whatnot. I believe the government thinks you can't have your cake and eat it too. So as you save money as a self-employed person, it hinders you on mortgage, but the amount you saved on tax should offset your extra interest costs in most cases. So it becomes a lack of knowledge when someone's like, what? I gotta be with a B lender? So yeah, but look all the tax money you're saving. Like if you switch it and claim all that money on income and pay that tax, you're not ahead of the game.
Yeah, you're in a worse position.
Absolutely. So numbers
Yeah.
numbers don't lie. It's super important to dive into them.
Really, the A lender, B lender, C lender is about risk tolerance
Of the lender.
from the lender, and based on a risk chart that was probably created by a bunch of people that would never jump out of an airplane.
Or build anything.
Right. So it's not like a hit to you or your finances or anything like that. It's just their risk tolerance calculator. And building a construction is a higher risk lending project. And so a lot of the times to get through that construction project, you need to be with a B lender or even a C lender.
Is it?
Now, do you want to touch on C lender?
C lender doesn't necessarily care about your income and or your credits. It's about the project.
Yeah.
So again, sometimes it's necessary to get the project built because of the spread
Yeah.
to maximize your profits. And if you don't do that, you don't have an option and you don't have a spread.
And you do have a project.
And this is a great project to illustrate that, because here you have a profit total of about $1 million when you factor in the equity that you have to put into the deal. Now, even if the interest on this loan that you'd be taking is more than the $100,000 that Lenny suggested before, let's say you go with a C lender and that interest is double. Let's say it's $200,000, which would be, instead of paying 6%, you're paying 12%. That 12% can look scary, but this deal is still making you $800,000.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of a really good return for the money that you're putting into this project. So rate isn't everything, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. And, the client doing this and you guys build this for them, like, what did the client have to do? They had to sign some mortgage documents and keep talking to you guys, and you guys just built them a $3 million property, and there's enough spread for higher interest costs or, any hiccups that come along. It's pretty safe. And because the lender has the appraiser do as if complete, they know lenders aren't in the business of owning houses. They're in the business of lending money. And so they don't want to do the project if they feel that they're going to have to foreclose on it or they're going to run into problems. That's why they do that as if complete, and they mitigate as much as possible up front.
Now tell us about the J lender.
Ha 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 ha. We only go to C. We only go to C. Ha ha ha.
Well, I think a term that people might be a bit scared of is private lender.
Yeah, they're known as private lenders, but it's just because they don't follow under the laws that the banks do. And
So they're not restricting out of the back of their car and then suitcase and then.
no, monies are all done through the lawyer's office. Yeah, absolutely. They'll only go to 75% of your property.
They're following the same rules.
Absolutely. They're following the same rules in terms of the asset, not the income. But it would be like, what's the exit strategy? And so we have a client today. They have a great first mortgage. They want to sell their place, but they need some money out of their property to then sell it. Well, they have to take out a C lender, a private mortgage to do that. And the lender's like, great. Now I know there's an exit strategy and it's a win-win for both parties.
Yeah.
Great.
When you're lending on a project, you're looking at the appraisals. You're looking at the builder, the developer. Can they get it done? Can it get it done in a timeline? Do they have experience in that area?
Yeah, if you think that you are going to do this on your own and you come to me with a contract that you're like, well, I know how to do electrical and framing, you are false.
God
No
knows
lender,
days.
absolutely, no lender will approve that. As you guys know, you need to do a warranty for one.
That's right.
The biggest thing.
Yeah.
But no lenders will be like, a jack of all trades could give a resume and they'd be like, yeah, okay, maybe that makes sense. There's enough equity in the project. And they would take a look at approving that. Now you have to work with a professional.
Back in 08, 09, having the owner do it themselves was more common and not these days.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't use a dentist. That was
Yeah.
like, experience is so key, especially when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, it's insane.
Thanks for watching our video. This is Performance Infill. You can find us at performanceinfill.com. Our phone number's there. Give us a call. Let's chat about what you can do.